going back to the aleph, aleph as the prefix in front of a word, quite often you'll see it actually translated in the Hebrew Tanakh as meaning I will. So it shows an intention. This is what I'm going to do. But aleph as the word of the first letter basically means I am. So aleph speaks of identity and intention. Though it's silent, it expresses its identity and intention in the other letters. So bet is the container, so you could say the bet of the aleph is the container, which technically is the aleph bet. So you have this concept of what's called Russian dolls. You know, there's a big one, and inside the big one is another one, and inside that one's another one, and inside that one's another one, and you go all the way down to the little one in the middle. That's the way the alphabet works. So in the aleph is all the other letters. Inside the aleph is the bet, but inside the bet is all the other letters. And so the concept of in is the first plan, aleph, was expressed in the simplest model, and that model was bet. And the model of bet is in or into. Into infers possibility of not into. In infers the possibility of not in. It's the duality, the binary distinction of or not of. So in bet, and I'm trying to get you to think, whenever you see the letter bet, you can think of or not of. Way, this up or down, like the scales. It's either this side's up or that side's up, or they're balanced. But so when you think of weighing and measuring, as a matter of fact, the word bean, bet yod nun, I'll draw that word out here, bet yod nun. We talked about bet vav nun and bet nun hey, and the reason I'm writing these down, you have to look them up in the Red Dictionary. That would take so long. We could spend hours just talking about every little aspect of the word. But the word bean, or bina, has to do with wisdom and knowledge. It's chachma and bina, wisdom and knowledge. It has to do with Strong's number 995. Well, it's spelled the same as 996, and one of them just says, well, it means between. Between me and between you is the way it's phrased. You know, he's separated between the light and between the dark. Well, it doesn't say that in English. It says he's separated between light and dark. That's not what it says in Hebrew. It says he's separated between the light and between the dark. Or he set up a covenant between me and between you. And you go, well, that doesn't make sense in English. We're not trying to read English. We're trying to understand what the Creator says. And when he says, I'm making a covenant between me and between you, it's like, why is he saying that? That's another question. That's another branch of the banyan tree to run that one down. But what I'm saying is, if you can understand the Hebrew, you can go back to what he really said, not what somebody said he said. So when what we have in English came out of Latin or Greek, which came out of maybe Aramaic, or maybe they went back to Hebrew, but that's the modern Chaldean flame letters, which it was interpreted via the mechanism of the Septuagint, which was... But how do you go back to Paleo? See, if you know the Paleo letters, you don't need a translation. The word bean in Strong's number 995 is actually written on the chart on the middle of the left-hand side, and it means consider, evaluate, meditate, contemplate, weigh, scrutinize, look well to, really cogitate, mental processing. Anyway, that's the letter. It has to do with the letter bet. What in noon is to engage in the life. And the word son, of course, was just simply bet noon. And you could say, well, bet noon, according to Frank Sequins, is the life of the house. When you have a son is a ben. Bet noon, son. So the son is the life of the house. But when you have the yod, which is the working hand, you could say, well, that's the working hand functioning. I got a working hand, but if there's no tool in my hand, I'm not doing anything yet. There's a potential. It's a latent potential, but to put the tool in my hand and go to work, it's now a manifest of that potential, right? So bet yod nun is the manifest potential that's in the yod of the bet. So to say, we who are his ben ought to be functioning, and right there in that word, the simplest form of functioning is to think, meditate, contemplate, look well to, weigh, measure, ponder, and be about the business. It reminds you, Sepharim, connecting the dots, going back to Deuteronomy, where he gave us his commandments, and he says, and you shall think of these things, and talk of these things. when you lie down, and when you rise up. Now, when you lie down, you go into your personal space, and when you rise up, you're going into your public space. You see the bet there? See the embedded bet? The personal space, the public space. So he says, and you will teach them, you will think about them, personal, and you will teach them to your children, public. And you will write them on the doorposts of your house, personal, and upon your gates, public. There's this, again, this duality, this distinction of the personal and the public. And that's embedded in the letter bet. It's in its simplest form. So what I'm saying is if you see that, then when you see the letter bet, you're not just thinking, oh, house. It's a container. Well, then the question is, well, who's the bet? Who is this house? What is this house? What determines whether you're in or out? So you just say you can be in, you can be out. You can say, well, you could have a choice. But then how is that manifest? How is that noticed? How is that seen? Well, then you get into all these other words and all these other scriptures. And again, I could go through a whole list of scriptures, we could look them all up, but I don't think we have time for that, so I'm going to make mentions of things. So when Yahweh says, we talked last week about the ideal Aleph, the ideal plan, and Yahweh says it, I will be your Elohim, and you will be my people. Yeah, that's a great plan. You're going to be my people. It's like, what did he have in mind? And I mentioned, maybe it was a month ago on that other tape, it's like, you look at the history all through the Bible and all through just regular secular history. What's the history of the face of the earth? Well, let's see. You had these guys, they were put in the garden, it was supposed to be really good, but they did something wrong, so they got smacked, and then they got sent out, and they were in distress, and then they had kids, and they killed each other, and then everybody spun out, and then there was a flood, and then they all spun out, and there's a Tower of Babel, and blah, blah, blah. Nothing but wreck and ruin. And then he's supposed to say, okay, my plan was accomplished, I'm going to come back now and call the world done. Was that his plan? I mean, you know, you could make some commentary about that, which isn't so kind to him, if that's his plan. But that's all we've seen. Is that the Aleph? Is this the great Aleph that he determined? And they say, oh, yes. And I'll make a bet. And well, you read the scriptures, not from a Christian point of view, but from just take it at face value, and you'll see a whole different story, a whole different potential. You'll see that Yahweh said, I've got this great plan, and it thrilled his heart. The word resh nun nun is ronan, which is a ringing cry, a shout of joy. And so when you find a verse where that word is written, resh nun nun, you go, and I know that word because I've looked it up in the Red Dictionary. As soon as you see those letters, resh nun nun, you go, oh, this has to do with a ringing cry and a shout of joy. Who is rejoicing? And then you go and you read the context of the verse, and you'll see it's a whole different thing than the way it may have been translated. So if you start to know certain Hebrew words and concepts, even this little word or that little word, like the word ayin dalet is a witness or a testimony. In Hebrew, ayin dalet is written in Paleo Hebrew, ayin dalet. Well, that's the word until. So you have ayin dalet, ayin tav, until the time, which is in Daniel 12:4. But this word until, it doesn't just mean until, but in English that's the way it's translated. But it's a indicator. So if you say, if I see an oil slick underneath my truck, that's the indicator that I've got a problem. But I'm going to drive my truck until I see the oil slick, and then I'm going to take it to the mechanic. The oil slick is an ayin dalet. You could say, well, it's an eyeball, and a dalet is the door. Understand the door. Well, the door is a threshold. Well, where's the threshold? It's kind of a choice. You know, you could be inside or outside. There's a threshold. There's a door. In this room or in that room? Do you choose to go through the door? It's like, understand the door. No, here's another way to read the indicator, the witness. It means literally witness and testifier, or the testimony of the witness. You could say, I'm going to choose to stay on this side of the wall until I see the oil slick, and then I'm going to go through the door of the mechanic and have him fix my truck. That's ayin dalet. I'm going to see the door, I'm going to see the witness of the oil slick, and then choose to go through another door that I'm not going to go through and waste money unnecessarily. You see the connections? If you just think, oh, the word ayin dalet means until, that's true, but it's just a little piece. So then you have the word in Hebrew that's spelled mem, ayin dalet, or mem vav ayin dalet, which would be moed. Well, mem, remember, is a place, or it's like incubating, or a time, or a pregnancy. It's a time of counting. And a moed happens to mean the place or the time of the appointed gathering of those who witness or testify that they belong to Yud He Vav He. It's the appointed festivals in their, the word is translated seasons in Genesis 1 for day 4, where he put the sun and the moon and the stars in their moedim, in their seasons. But you can read the moedim as the appointed festivals. These are the appointed witnesses, or this is the assembly of gathering where my witnesses are told. If you look in the Red Dictionary, it'll also tell you that a moed is the rank of a soldier, or the position of a soldier. If you say, hey, your job is to stand at that door, and the other soldier's job is to stand at that door, that's their moed. So when Yahweh said, here's my house, now at my house I have appointed places. One's there, one's there. We got this one in the first month on the 14th day, the 15th day, and then Shavuot 50 days later. And in the 7th month, we've got these. And on the 7th day of each week, we've got this mandatory appointment of my people, my witnesses, my house, the Shabbat. And you could say, you can rest any day you want. Certainly you can. You can worship any day you want. Certainly you can. But the appointment, Leviticus 23, Yahweh said, these are my moedim, appointed festivals. You could say, I'm going to go out on the street and witness. That's the word ayin dalet. But he said, until the 7th day, a man should work. And on the 7th day, he better rest. And you could say, there's that law again. He better do this. And he better. El Shaddai. We talked about this last week. Genesis 17:1. I am El Shaddai. Abraham, you better walk before me and be perfect. It's like, with the laws again. But if you look at it in Hebrew, what he says is, and this is my translation, he says, look at the empty space inside. Take a look at what's inside you that's empty. I'm the guy that'll fill that up for you. Say, wait a minute, that's a whole different way to render that verse. I am El Shaddai, the Aleph Tav, the provider and the one who says enough and will give you all your sufficiency. Look at the empty space inside. I'm the guy that will fill it for you. But it's the same exact words as walk before me and be ye perfect. And you could say, walk before me, the word is halakha, but the word for halakha also has a tav in there, and if you look at the letters tav, I think it's like tav he lamed instead of he lamed kaf. Kaf means your, tav he lamed means look at your emptiness. You can say, well, I know it means you're supposed to walk. Look at the way you walk, and if you walk according to what I tell you, your emptiness will be filled and made complete and perfect, because when he says, and be ye perfect, the word be ye means that's what will come about is your filling up and being made complete and satisfied, where we get the word shalom. But it's not the word shalom, it's the word tomim, or tom, where we get tav mem. Anyway, my point is, there's a whole different way to read these verses, and it's very encouraging. But yet, if you hear about the people who can't read, and the people who don't believe the Torah, and the people that came up with a different gospel, and a different covenant and did away with the promises, they will tell you that what you better be preparing for right now is another Holocaust, a time of devastation, the ruining of the world, the Antichrist, the beast, and you guys are in big trouble because your Elohim has already sold you out and given you over to a time when he will have power to prevail over you. And yet I translated that verse, I think it's in Daniel 7, and it reads the opposite. I'd have to go look it up and read it to you. But my point is, I'm trying to give you some encouraging words because I think that the keepers of the books, there's two ways to read the words. One is the blessing and one is the curse. And if you forsake his ways, we'll get the curse. All we have to do is come back to his ways. And I believe that there's reason to believe for the blessing. And it's in these words. It's in the Hebrew. It's in these words. We got to learn these words. Just for what it's worth, this is a bit of a tangent. We looked at banyan tree and said Hawaii. We talked about this before, but I was talking to somebody during the break. Hawaii. If you phonetically, you don't know Hebrew, phonetically sound out the English letters or the Hebrew letters that would go for the English phonetic syllables. Ha would be a hey. W, the Hawaiians say Hawaii, or it's Hawaii, or W-U-V. There's one Hebrew letter that sounds like an O, a U, a V, or W, and that's Vav. And then you got another Ah. Well, an Ah could be an ayin, it could be a aleph, or it could be another hey, but the aleph is silent. It has to have an inferred vowel point, and the ayin technically has a guttural GH sound, so the pure Ah sound would be another hey, and then the word, the phonetic E, as in Israel, or Ami, my people, Am is people, Am-E means my people, would be a Yod. So the word Hawaii is Hey Vav Hey Yod. Well, that's read left to right. But if you read it in English from right to left, it's Yod Hey Vav Hey. Yod Hey Vav Hey in Hawaii. And you can say, how did that get there? How did that get there? Were Solomon's ships going around the world back in, 800 BC and dropped off some guys there, and they said, wow, what a great place. Let's hide his name here. I'm guessing. The point is, you could say, well, how do you pronounce his name? Nobody knows how to pronounce his name. It's been hidden, it's been scrambled, it's been forbidden to be mentioned. And it's like, so I was thinking, well, how would you, if you read it from right to left, how do you phonetically say Hawaii backwards? It would be Iawa. Iawa. Kind of sounds like Yod He Vav He. And so, interestingly enough, if you look at the Hebrew vowels, A, E, I, O, U, and you arrange them like this, Iawa, it's the same word. So that's why on the song it says Iawa El Shaddai. And somebody could say, you're not supposed to speak the name. I'm not speaking the name, I'm saying the word Hawaii backwards. It just so happens to be Yod He Vav He. It's like, don't throw rocks. Anyway, so I would say, who is Israel? Israel is anybody who chooses to keep his covenant and go back to his commandments. I will read you something from Ezekiel 6:9. It says, quick, has this happened yet? And your survivors will remember me among the nations where they were taken captive. This is Yahweh speaking, as how I was anguished by their straying heart that turned away from me, and by their eyes that strayed after their idols. The word for anguished, Yahweh says, I was anguished. And you go, he didn't like it. He was anguished. The word anguished, if you look it up in the Red Dictionary, it means broken, smashed, demolished, torn, ripped, hernia, fractioned. And it's the breaking of a dream, like the solution or the interpretation where you say, well, you break a dream, but you say, we broke his dream by straying from his words. What was his dream? The dream is in the alphabet. His identity is in the alphabet. His intention is in the alphabet. The description of his people is in the alphabet. Our instructions are in the alphabet. The identity of the Mashiach, the greatest riddle, the ultimate paradigm, is that he's described by the letters of the alphabet. Like I said before, it's kind of like Cinderella's slipper. The alphabet is Cinderella's slipper, only it's not Cinderella, it's the Mashiach. It's the Mashiach's glass slipper. Whose foot fits this shoe? He is described. The one the world yearns for is described by these letters. You interpret these letters and you will see his identity. Interestingly enough, you could look at the word Bet Gimel Dalet. It forms a word. And you look it up in the dictionary. We won't go there. It's a word for clothing, and it means to camouflage. And you say baged. See, there's a lot of similarities between English and Hebrew, between Spanish and Hebrew, and Greek and Hebrew. It's where you get the word bagged, or baggy clothing. It camouflages your shape. There's another word for clothing, which is, I believe it's a Samic Mem Lamed, which is simla. Well, if you wear a tight-fitting leotard, your clothing looks similar to your shape. You can see your shape. But if you wear baggy clothing, you can't see your shape. You're camouflage. If you look at the letter Aleph as the identity and intention, I am, I will, Gimel, be the sent one to the Dalet earth, Baged, camouflaged as Hey, looking like Vav, man. I will baggedly camouflage myself to come to the earth, revealed as a man who would be slain. Outside the Het, outside the walls of Jerusalem, is what happened to this one Yeshua 2,000 years ago, but also he was entombed in an enclosure. Het is an enclosure. He was entombed in the enclosure and Het sealed by the Roman insignia to make sure no one's going to come and swipe him. But he says, don't blame the Romans. The rabbis say that the Romans were actually the descendants of Esau. So here you have both the descendants of Yaakov and the descendants of Esau, both conspiring to slaughter the sent one, the Mashiach. But he says, don't blame either one. Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Because the letter Yod says, my, for work. This is my work. The Aleph is saying, this is my plan. It was my plan. I'm doing this. So to speak to Brother Yehuda and say, I don't know who you're looking for, who you're waiting for, but whose foot fits this shoe? If this is the guy that came 2,000 years ago, that was Zioned outside the Het, and then entombed and sealed Yod, but yet by the terms of the Torah and by the terms of any civil law, he was not guilty, and then to cut to the end, Zadi, he resurrected, and Kuf went back up, but yet Kuf, he's coming back as Resh, the exalted one, Shin, our shining Elyon, Yahweh, El Shaddai, at which time he will then incinerate. Shin is also fire, it's also teeth which consumes. He will incinerate his adversaries, and Tav establish the covenant. Who fits that description? If that's the guy that 2,000 years ago all the hubbub is about, he's not the guy that did away with the covenant, changed the day, changed the festivals, gave us Christmas, Easter, and Halloween instead of the 7 Moedim that are listed in Leviticus 23. But if he's the same guy, we should be regarding him and saying, thank you, Yahweh, show us how to be your people. So to go back on to be, and whose people is this? We can then start reading all through the scriptures. Psalms 50, verse 16. But to the wicked, says Elohim, and then you have to look at the word wicked and say, well, you have to start scrutinizing every word. Who are the wicked? To say, well, just the wicked. In the Gospels it says, to those who will be cast out, he says, depart from me, you workers of iniquity. And you say, well, those are the people who say, Lord, Lord, we've done miracles and wonders in your name, but the word iniquity means wicked, which is twisted. It's actually anomio in Greek, which means without the law, without the Torah. And he certainly wasn't talking about civil law. He was talking about the law of the Torah. So he says, you who don't keep the Torah, have no regard to the Torah, depart from me, I don't even know you. But here it says, to the wicked, he says Elohim, to what purpose do you recount my decrees? The word recount there is sefer. We talked about the word sefer last week. Connect the dots. My decrees, that's the word chok. It's the Het Kuf, which is the big white fence and the pillar of fire and pillar of smoke and everything in between. And we just kind of went over that the 7 festivals are between the Het and the Kuf. Question mark, exclamation point above the Ark of the Covenant, inside the big white fence. This is the kingdom of Yod He Vav He. That's the Het Kuf. It's the word translated as commandment or ordinances. This is his stuff. This is his treasure box. This is his stuff for his people. You come in, you get stamped, branded by the Tet. You get filled with the Ruach. You come in through the blood. It's the picture of circumcision. It's also the picture you come into the Kaf. Here's the instructions. Keep the Shabbat. Oh, you can't remember the instructions? Here, I'll make it easy for you. The Almighty said both in the book of Numbers and in Deuteronomy. He says, soon as he made the decree that they should rest on the Sabbath day, gave them the 10 Commandments, a guy goes out and he gathers up a pile of sticks. Now, there was a very famous record album of the 70s showing this guy with a big pile of sticks. And I thought, why is that on there? Somebody told me years later, says, that's a picture of the guy that rebelled against the ways of Yahweh. High-handed rebellion, says, up yours. He went out and gathered a bunch of sticks, and the men of Israel captured and said, now what are we going to do? We were told not to. And this guy says, whatever. grabs the pile of sticks and is bringing them in. They dragged them into Moses, and Moses goes, "Why, come on, you guys. I don't know what to do with this guy." He goes to Yahweh, and Yahweh says, "Kill him. Stone him to death. And furthermore, you shall tie for yourselves fringes to wear with a blue thread. And when you see the blue thread, you will remember that I created this place, and I gave you the instructions." So to play off the imagery, here's these blue threads in this white shirt, white being the aleph, bet, color blue, separating out, being distinctive from the aleph otherwise, but going back to the blue thread. Here's the big zitziot, just for a joke, kind of, sort of. You tie these things, the number of wrappings around of the letters. So this is 10, 5, 6, 5, which is Yod, He, Vav, He. Shin, 21, Ayin, 16. So it's Yod, He, Vav, He, Shin, Ayin. Yahweh's our salvation. The four colors, blue, purple, red, white. The blue for the Creator's blue thread. The Creator of the heavens and the earth. That's why the Bet is the blue in this thing. The Aleph, the white, containing all the colors. Bet is the blue. I am the Creator of the heavens and the earth. The blue, the sapphire floor that Moshe saw with the 70 elders when they were up on Mount Sinai. And he said, tie for yourselves a blue thread. Remember that I made the heavens and the earth. And if you're my people, I'm going to tell you the secrets of how it works. I'll give you the scoop of how to be successful, how to be healthy. And if you keep my ways, I will see to it that your enemies flee. I will send hornets after them. We were over in Israel. Those hornets are about 2 inches long. They're bigger around than a pencil, and they're brown and like this orange color. One of those guys would be bad enough, but to have a swarm, and Yahweh said, I promise that I will send those hornets after your enemies, and I will fill your enemies with terror at you. Read the book of Esther. Once Mordecai was shown favor, everybody wanted to become Jewish, it says, because they were looking for the favor. There's all kinds of promises, and if we say, hey, the law was done away with, I'll tell you, because we don't know how to read, and all we read is law, walk before me and be perfect, like Genesis 17:1, we say, boy, if we could just get away with that law, just do away with the law. Embedded in the same words of the law are words of promise and blessing. If we only see the curse or the threat of the curse or this law, Yahweh is saying, keep my ways and you will get the blessing. His words are truth. It's his commitment. It's his oath. The purpose of saying, what is this stuff in this bet? It says, if you want to be my people, keep my ways and I will just pour out everything I got for you. And if the law is done away with, he's off the hook and he owes us nothing. But by oath, the word oath is also shavah or shavuah, which is the word for seven. There's 7 festivals. The seventh day. You keep the seventh day Sabbath. It's the oath. It's the wedding ring. Sealed by Tet like a wedding ring. The 7 festivals, like a Jewish getting married and walks around her husband 7 times. For us to keep his festivals is the marriage oath of a wife walking around her husband. He said he would encircle us. Here's this picture. The letters around the Nun Samach. The Nun Samach is that which is lifted up like a banner to flutter and fly and drag us attention. Yeshua said, if I be lifted up, I will draw all men unto me. All the letters surrounding it is a picture of his oath. If you know what these letters mean, every single one of them is Yahweh's oath of what he will give his bet, his people, if we choose to be his bet. Israel, we must regard his words. Time for a break. Being that this is the week of Bet, the first letter in the scriptures is the letter Bet. And we mentioned something about the jots and the tittles, so I want to show you the first word and what is in the first word, just as a little way to play with what you can do with every word. So in the Hebrew Torah, the first letter is an enlarged letter, Bet. Resh, Aleph, Shin, Yod, Tav. And the word is Bereshit. The letter Bet as a prefix means in or with or among, or through. And the reason I can say that is because you can look at various ways it was translated if you get yourself a Hebrew Tanakh. I use Stone's edition. I like the way it was written out a little better than JPS. Those are the two most popular. But quite often, if a letter starts with the letter bet, you'll see it's translated as in such and such, or on such and such, or through, or among. So you can infer the meaning by the way other people have translated it. They're not always necessarily accurate, but you can count on it being accurate because it's a concept of betness, not necessarily only the literal. That's what I'm trying to get through here. So as one of the jots or tittles, there's this anomaly that the letter bet is enlarged, and it's the first letter of the Torah. And you could say, why? Well, if you just simply say, well, what does the letter bet mean? Well, this word resh aleph shin is the word rosh, which means head, which means foremost or preeminent, or the beginning of like the headwaters of a river. If you look at the word shin yod tav, is where you get the word seat, or to sit, or the foundation, or the bottom. So you could say, well, here's the top and the bottom. Here's the beginning, the bottom of the beginning, and the head being the top, the beginning and the end. Or you could say, well, the head is also the beginning of something, so the beginning and the fundamental of something, so that's also in this word. And you could say, well, Resh is the exalted man, and here's the big house. You could say, well, is the big house the creation, or is the big house like the heavenly kingdom, as we might want to see of it? And you could say, here's the Aleph, which is to say, that's the first order of business. And Shin, we also said, is the monogram of El Shaddai, so that's kind of encrypted there. And Yod is a hand that works. And Tav is the sign of the covenant, which you might say, if you put a circle around it, looks like a tet, which is to be sealed, but it's the word for covenant, which is Brit, B-R-I-T, Resh Yod Tav. You could say, but one way to read this, the word Bereshit, if you want to just take apart the letters and plug in individual word meanings, is in the Resh. First, El Shaddai worked or built or established or manufactured the covenant. Well, now it goes back to say, well, what's this Resh? And if you go back to the pattern of the message embedded in the alphabet itself, Resh is Mashiach ben David, not the one coming as the Vav ben Yosef, camouflaged as the man who would be slain, but after this, Kuf, our shining Elyon, Yahweh El Shaddai, Resh, our exalted prince, in him, Mashiach, full-faced. Resh is the head, the face. Kuf is the back of the head. Moshe said, let me see your glory. He says, no man can see my face and live. I'll put my kaf over you. You'll see my kuf view. But after this, we get the Resh view. Mashiach ben David coming shining as El Shaddai. In that guy, as the first order of business, as the Aleph, the plan was for the Aleph Tav incorporated as El Shaddai, the Almighty, to build, work into his identity, character, nature, and everything he exemplified, the covenant. And the covenant is everything described by the letters Aleph through Tav. Yeshua then himself really is these 22 letters personified as humanity, telling us this is what you guys should look like. This is what you should do. So he has the icon, the type of the Zadi, the letter before the Kuf, the Ark of the Covenant, which is the iconic archetype saying this is the quintessential man, which is why the song says, Zadi stands alone, the one and only, though all Israel shall become. All of us who want to follow him and be him should look like him. What did he look like? These 22 letters in their pure form, inflated, which is the expression of El Shaddai, the expression of Yod He Vav He, the expression of El Elyon, the one and only, that we are all going to be conformed to his image. So back on the chart it says the Vav is the caterpillar type, us crawling on the face of the earth, and Resh is the butterfly type, flying through the new dimension of the promise beyond our expectations, drinking the nectar instead of chewing on leaves and lettuce the way we do now. I mean, the dichotomy again, the bet, the one and the other, the tension of the hope set before us is just amazing, and it's all right there. He embodies these 22 letters, And that's what we should become. And it's not too hard for us. Moshe said, the words are in your mouth. Don't think they're too far away on the other side of the ocean somewhere. It's like, what words are in our mouth? Interestingly enough, to say, there, I have placed them in your mouth, it's in Hosea. There's two places I found the word Shin Mem Tav Yod Kaf. Shin Mem Tav Semeti. Sem, Shin Mem is name, fame, renown, reputation, but it also means here or there. To have place, I have placed them is Shin Mem Tav Yod, which is Semeti, and I've placed them I have placed them in your is the word Semitic. The Semitic alphabet, the Semitic language, from which comes all the European languages and English and Greek and Latin, is the base of this, which comes from the Phoenician, which is actually ancient Hebrew, the Semitic language. Yahweh said, the words that I have put in your mouth, I will not take, you can't get them out of your mouth, nor your children, nor your children's children forever. Why? Because it's the structure of how we think. Consonants, vowels, past tense, future tense. The Semitic language structure is Yahweh's self embedded within our consciousness, which is actually a description of the Mashiach. It's fascinating stuff.
I had a question, but you already answered it by what you just said before. I raised my hand. The question that I had, you really pretty well answered it, is that it seems like Yahweh's plan for salvation of the world, why he created the world, is all embedded in Bereshit.
Right.
Hallelujah.
And it's a good thing that it wasn't done away with, as some people might have told us in the past. It's a good thing it still works. It's still active, and it's still just as vibrant and useful as ever.
My question is, if I want to study the scriptures, right, and I have the English translation, but I want to be able to study it this way, what tools do I need to do that?
Okay, what I do is you read something in English. Now, I happen to have this Stone Tanakh that's put out by Art School Publications. I got it at a store called Everything Jewish. You can get them online. It has English on one side and Hebrew on the other. If you don't read Hebrew, you can read it in English, but then if you have an interlinear, they'll show you Hebrew, and there's a Strong's number, and you can look up actually in Strong's, or you read it in English from the Strong is keyed to King James Version, KJV. This isn't KJV, and so it renders differently, and so sometimes I have to look up in Strong's and sometimes here. But the point is, if you read a verse in English and you go, hey, I'd like to know what that reads in Hebrew, then you look at a cross, and if you don't know these Hebrew words, then it doesn't help you. If you know the alphabet, though, you can look up in this red dictionary. And again, I think this is this incredible resource, but you have to be able to identify the letters. So if you look them up in here, what I do is I look at every individual letter meaning, every two-letter meaning. So, for example, you look up this word that's spelled Bet, Kuf, Nun, Aleph, Tav, Yod. I look up every word that starts with Tav, Yod. And then I look up the words that start with Aleph, Tav, Yod. Nun, Aleph, Tav. Kuf, Nun, Aleph. Bet, Kuf, Nun, and Bet, Kuf, Nun, Aleph. I look up all those words, and I try to extract out of that word everything in there. And then I'll look at other words by the use of this dictionary that are related. I know that if you add an Aleph at the end of a word, sometimes it changes it, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you can add a Vav or a Nun somewhere in between the other letters, and you'll see related words. You can add a Tav before or after. You can add a Nun, or you can add a Kaf. What I was going to talk about a month ago, with the talk that I didn't end up giving, is that if you understand that some words act as prefixes and suffixes, then when you go to look in this dictionary, because there's words in here that don't appear in there, you can add or subtract vavs and yods. You can put a hey at the end or not. You can put a nun as the beginning, like to impart an action. You can have an aleph in the beginning, meaning I will. You can have a kaf, which means like, or you can take those off. Or you can put a tav, which is future tense or past tense, and a lamed meaning unto, mem meaning from. And if you look at the words with those suffixes and prefixes added or taken away, it'll give you a feeling for the word. But that means what you need to do is really work every word. And you might spend all day on one word, hours. But the other thing that I do is transpose from the modern font into the Paleo, because what I found, even though I have to go to the modern style of letters to use this either Strong's or this dictionary, because this dictionary you have to see the spelling of the Hebrew word and it gives you the translation in English, what it means. But by putting it in Paleo, I now disengage my mind from that, what you might call left brain thinking, and go to the right brain thinking, which is pictographic, and you're using a whole different way of rendering it. And if I look at the words written in Paleo, I'm no longer thinking this more logical, rational, what they tell me it means according to the scholarly, literate approach, and now I'm just looking at the pictures embedded in these letters. So I'm trying to show you the different mechanisms that I would use, but all I use is the Tanakh and the dictionary at this point. I've almost ceased to use. I've got Brown Driver Briggs, and I've got Stone's, which I use sometimes, and I've got Reuben Alcala's 5-volume dictionary that has from English to Hebrew and Hebrew to English, which is very useful. Yeah. Somebody made a comment?
You don't need
I
vowel
don't use the vowel markings. Now, some would say, okay, I'm wrong. But here's the interesting thing about the vowel markings. I found a verse that said something about putting lines and dots, subliminally, and it's like, well, listen, the Masoretic scribes had a reason. The Torah was rendered verbally, and it was getting lost, apparently, so they put the vowel markings so people could keep doing it verbally. But by doing it verbally, you've now locked in a certain way of rendering a word that might be like the word bin. Beyt Yod Nun, Strong's number 995 and 996. It says all but once or twice, it's always means simply word between, and then you look at the other one, 995, and it's like there's 20 adjectives that have to do with thinking. And I was told by one person that it's carnal to think. To use your brain is carnality. It's not spiritual. And it's like, but the scriptures tell us all over the place to use the brain that the Creator invented. Look at the Beyt. You got the head section, the brain section, then you got the body section that functions. You've got, it also is intake, like the Beyt almost looks like a big mouth, right? There's the intake, there's the cogitating, and it's like, but by them telling us, oh, the word being simply means between, you go, oh, okay, it stops right there. One of the things I was suggesting regarding this red dictionary, if you don't even know Hebrew, okay, I'm going to pretend like I don't read Hebrew. I'm going to open it up and just read something. It says here, to knock or strike, fixed a nail, struck in or carved, played a musical instrument, compared. And it's like, why do all those words fit the same word? To knock or strike, to play a musical instrument, to compare. And you go, well, the musical instrument, well, that makes me think of David. He had this harp, and he struck these chords, but then I know that Shoshana Harari has this, in Jerusalem, has this 22-string harp, and each one of those strings are keyed to one of the letters, so when you're comparing these letters together, you're almost like pairing them into chords and playing songs. So now I'm taking this word, though I don't know what it is, and I'm looking at concepts that are embedded in the Hebrew, and now that I know better, I know that this says nun, kuf, shin. And so I said, well, nun is an action. It can be seen as a prefix, though it can be just one of the letters of the 3-word root here, but then it says kuf, shin. So I go, well, if nun is the prefix of a kuf, shin, now I'm going to go back, but I have to know where the letter kuf is. It's toward the back, and then I look at kuf shin, which is the back of the back there, and then this is literally how I do this for many, many hours, and I look at the word for kuf shin, kuf resh, here's kuf shin. It means straw, stubble, chaff. Straw, stubble, that's like strings, right, on a harp. They're stiff. And then you say, well, I know that if you say kuf shin, hay, if you add the hay as a suffix, it says what it looks like or what it comes from, or to be hard, stiff, difficult, severe. So straw or stubble is kuf shin, but the quality attributes, like straw, to be stiff-necked or hard or like a taut string, is to be hard, stiff, severe, or difficult. It also means a woman to have severe labor or a man to be working with hard labor. It also means to ask difficult questions. Difficult questions are made unintelligible, to become hard to understand. Yahweh said he would punish his people by making his ways that they rejected to become difficult and hard to understand. He says, okay, fine. You don't want my words? Tell you what, I will take them away. Take them out of your mouth, take them out of your mind. They will be too difficult for you until the day, and I find this in Scripture, I can tell you a number of verses. He says, until the day that you come back and say, please, can I have understanding of your words? And he says, sure, I'll give it to you. But you're going to have to come begging for it this time. I gave it to you of my volition last time. You guys spit on it, kicked it out the door, defiled it. I'm taking it away. And it became kuf shin, hay, to us. Until now. And the benefit of this is to kuf resh aleph, Kra is the word to cry, to call, to invoke, to summon, like moed, the place of summoning, and it also means to teach, to read. To teach, to read. To teach how to read is what to call, to summon to his moedim is all about. That's what we're doing. We're calling, we're invoking an assembly to teach, to read, which is his cry, kufresh yod. Yeah.
As we're learning the alphabet, and then we're learning the Paleo, so that we can understand what's written in the Word, do you see beyond that we're going to be coming into the land, going back to Israel, the place that we have been designed to be, speaking in picture form back and forth? I mean, right now I see where we just have the Hebrew that is being spoken, but we're learning a whole new level that has all of these rabbit trails in it. Will we be communicating with the rabbit trail language like we're using the non-rabbit trail language now? Do you see that happening?
I see verses, and again, we don't have time to go into all the verses. I could write them up and show people, but I see verses where it says exactly what you just said is going to happen. Now, people say, oh no, we're not going to go into the land, we're going to go into this spiritual kingdom, or Yeshua's going to come back, or Jesus is going to come back, or there's going to be a rapture, there's going to be, the millennial reign off the planet. It's like there's various eschatologies. And I'm not trying to debate those eschatologies. I'm simply trying to look at the words and say, what did he tell us? Once we figure out what he told us, then we can try to make sense of it and say, what might it mean, and how might we then determine an eschatological perspective, which is its own debate. But I'm just trying to say we don't even barely know how to say see spot one, run, and then we say, well, where did Spot run? Why was Spot running? But we're just at see Spot run at this point. There is people of Yehuda who suggest that if you sense that it's the time of the Mashiach, you better hurry up and start doing zadikah, righteous things, because it's the doing of the righteous things that you might say, grease the plates, that. Now, this is a very real thing that they determined from their scriptures. Now, I heard it said once that the rabbis say that when Adam and Hua were in the garden, that they didn't have skin, flesh bodies, that they were bodies clothed in light. And you go, where do these guys come up with this stuff? You can read it in your King James Bible where it says they were naked and they were not ashamed, and then all of a sudden they ate of the fruit and then they were naked. They realized they were naked, so he gave them animal skins. Okay, the reason I was wearing the animal skin last week had to do with the word adar, being clothed, and that whole thing. That's a whole other point. But you see, where do they come up with this idea? It's in the spelling of the words. If you look at the word for clothed, the word for skin, and what it means to be naked, and you'll see that it means all different kinds of things in Hebrew. Now, furthermore, the idea of what does it mean for the Messiah to come, the Christians have this concept of, the Jesus character is going to come back. But the Jews don't necessarily see it that way. From what I understand, what Yehuda sees is them being given the nobility of the kingdom. And you could say, is that going to happen if we learn the language? Well, I'll tell you, when I started learning the language, and I all of a sudden saw that the Shabbat, the seventh day, was two weapons, the Zion and the Zadi. Both those letters represent the Shabbat. One is the seventh letter, and the other one is in the pattern of the Mishkan in the place of the Ark of the Covenant. But the seventh letter was the place of the crucifixion, the Zion of the Vav man, who came as the Aleph Beted, incorporated in the material form as the Gimler, to the Dalet earth, Hayd revealed his man. When I saw that the two most important things of the crucifixion of the Vav man and the Zadi of the Ark of the Covenant both represented the Sabbath day, and they were both weapons, I thought the Sabbath day is pretty important.
Amen.
It changed the paradigm of my regard and my thinking. And will that cause Mashiach to come? I would say, yes, it will cause not only Mashiach ben David to come, but also the exaltation of Israel and the return of the blessing, because Yahweh said, just do what I told you to do. It's been the same conditions ever since the beginning. He says in another place, the exact same terms I gave to your forefathers that they rejected, I'm giving you the exact same terms. Nothing different, nothing changed.
Think what he says. He says, remember, and then he says, rest. I'm going to rest with you. This is the holy convocation. I'm calling you.
There's so much. Just to regard his words is only the beginning. To find out what the words say is one. To then say, I choose to regard them is two. But then what comes from the sake of regarding them is the coming of Mashiach, which is, it can be in different forms, because I'll tell you one thing, if you look at the word Mashiach in the dictionary and say, what does it mean? It means, okay, to be anointed. But the word sheikh, mem, sheikh, which is shin yod het, literally means the speaker, the talker, the communicator. And mem means from, or the place of, and you can say Mashiach literally means the place of speaking, the place of communication. The one who came to converse with us is Mashiach. And it's like, if we don't speak his language, he's how going to speak like a duck, you know. It's like, okay, well, is that, you know, if all we speak is that language, how much can he communicate of the intricacies of his word, you know?